Bismillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Is the sound okay from my side before we start? Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you for joining me this afternoon for I believe this is the last of the series of talks that MASJID-E-SALIHEEN has prepared. So we're going to talk about well-being post-Ramadan and post-lockdown, inshallah. So this is really difficult actually, because I do this over 3 webinars and each one is about an hour each. So I'm going to try and cram this in 1 hour. So just bear with me. Jazakallah khairan. So before we start, just a disclaimer. I'd love to give people personal advice, but it's really, really difficult. I'm sure you can understand why that is. And before you make any changes, please do check in with your GP, especially if you have any medical conditions or you're on any medication. So let's begin, inshallah. So it's important to know why we're talking about this, and then we'll talk about how to make changes. But why is really, really important, because currently, and this is before COVID, 50% of us, so South Asians, Afro-Caribbean, BAME, basically 50% of us are actually overweight or obese. In fact, when I started this in January 2020, before COVID, it actually stemmed from the fact that I was in the masjid and I looked around and I thought, gosh, there's so many people in the masjid who are sat here who are overweight that need support and education. And we also have the highest risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease compared to any other ethnicity. And I don't need to repeat the news, but there's been a disproportionate rate of incidence, severity, and mortality of COVID in the BME community. And so that, in fact, the risk of dying can be up to 2-fold in some sub-ethnicities within the BME group, which I'm sure you're all aware of. But regardless of race, ethnicity, obesity is a massive, massive risk factor. So up to 75% of people who are admitted on the severe spectrum of COVID over the past just over a year were actually overweight or obese, and 50% of those who passed away were obese, from my recollection. And also there's data coming in now that vaccine efficacy, so how well the vaccine works, is actually slightly reduced in people who are overweight, and in particular if they're obese. So these are like major issues that we need to deal with. Now Ramadan is a beautiful, beautiful month, isn't it? It's just an annual reset that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, where everything just resets, the mind, the body, the soul, everything. So this is a perfect time to use it as a springboard to move forward for the next 11 months, inshallah ta'ala. So we're going to talk about this over the next 45 minutes to an hour, inshallah. Now, there's a backdrop to this, and this is the message that I've been trying to deliver over the past 18 months or so, is that when there's a narrative, isn't there, that when you go to a doctor, and we're all guilty of this, when you go to the doctor, there's a narrative that if the doctor gives you a pill, you'll be okay, and that's the end of the story. And what we found as doctors is that actually, we're putting patients on a lot of these tablets to reduce their cholesterol and help with their diabetes and their blood pressure and so forth, but they're not getting any better. So that they're still coming back with the same problems, and their health isn't improving, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. So there's actually a massive push that I'm inspired with as well, and actually excited about because of the benefits of it, is that there's a massive role in lifestyle changes along with medicine. So you can't separate the two. But there's a massive push to if you improve lifestyle changes, you improve outcomes. And so, for example, there's a doctor up north who I'll mention later on when we talk about diabetes. He, through lifestyle changes, has actually proven to reverse diabetes. And if I remember correctly, in at least 40% of his patient list, where diabetes has been reversed through lifestyle changes. People have lost weight, people have come off medication and remained in remission, where actually they're quite stable without the need of medication, or actually instead of having 3, for example, they only have 1 tablet. Certainly some of my patients have come off blood pressure tablets because of lifestyle changes, antidepressants, painkillers, and all sorts, just because of serious lifestyle changes. So that's a sort of narrative behind what I'm saying. So hopefully you can follow it, inshallah. Remember what I said. So, in some cases you can't separate the need for lifestyle changes and medicine. You can't. But before you make any changes, do check in with your GP. So what are the elements of well-being? Okay, for me, it's these 4, and you cannot separate them. If one is absent, you won't have optimum well-being. Okay, so and it's actually the most important is right at the top. You have to have a nutritious diet, a super rich in nutrients diet. That's like right at the top. So if you look at, say, mental health, for example, people don't understand this, or don't know this, but actually, if you have a really, really rich diet, in particular a Mediterranean diet, you're going to be far better off in terms of your own emotional regulation than if you were on a rubbish diet, for example. In fact, there's a study called the SMILE study that was done that proved that just going on a Mediterranean diet for 6 months for those with mild to moderate depression, you actually don't need medication, really. It will help massively. So number 1 is diet, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. Then number 2 is regular physical activity. So not one-off marathons. I'm talking about regular physical activity. Number 3 is emotional regulation. If you are not good here, have the best diet in the world, have the best exercise regime, you're not going to feel in optimum health and optimum well-being. And then the 4th is definitely spiritual growth. There's a soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, where our body is the vehicle that carries that soul. When that is not growing, when that isn't alive, you don't have optimal well-being. And Ramadan is proof of it, because how good do we feel in Ramadan when our soul is, I don't like using the term, so apologies, but when our soul is dancing in Ramadan. So let's start with diet. And essentially it's about making healthy choices. So if you look at the picture, the bits, and the foods on the left, they just look nicer, don't they? Anyone would rather go for that than the green stuff on the other side. But it's about making healthy choices, because no one's forcing you to eat anything, really. It's a choice that we make. And it's important to actually make this clear in our minds, that it's about the word choice. It's about having healthy choices. And essentially you want to have foods that are rich in protein, complex carbohydrates, and what we call healthy fats, and avoid things that are pumped with sugar. Avoid simple carbohydrates, which is the good stuff on the picture that you can see, and avoid processed foods and junk. Okay, unless, like, for example, it's a treat, or everyone's too tired to cook in the house, so it's just going to take away. That's fine, but it should not be a regular thing. And so what we found is that, look, simple carbs, which is essentially junk food, crisps, biscuits, chocolate, white bread, white rice, white pasta, etc. Processed foods, for example, what we find, it gives you energy very, very quickly, but then it's also utilized very quickly, and then you have a crash. And then what happens is, how many times have you done this? You've had breakfast and you've had, you're very, it's like eating cardboard, isn't it? Cocoa Pops for breakfast. And then you have that 8 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock you get hungry because you have a crash. That's why it's happening, because it's being utilized very, very quickly. Whereas protein and complex carbohydrates and healthy fats, they stay in your system for a longer period, and you feel less hungry, basically. But they're the sort of choices you want to make, because essentially, you've got to see it like this. Sugar is poison. Okay, sugar is poison. Sugar is the problem right now. It's in everything. Like you look at, whatever you buy, just turn it around and have a look. It's in nearly everything. It's like, why is it in there? And the reason why it's in there is to make it taste nice. That's it. Because if you have things that are sugar free, it doesn't taste. It's an acquired taste, and it's highly addictive as well. It makes you feel good. It's a very addictive ingredient, and essentially, like, ask yourself this question with the last point: when was the last time you saw someone looking like me, okay, or looking like you, go for a run, or a decent bike ride, or do anything physically active that out there? Like, you just don't see us doing it, okay? And so what happens is it's converted to fats, and then the fats, they stay in places we don't want it to stay, okay, because it's not burnt off, okay? And then the cycle continues, if you know what I mean. So it's really important to hammer this home, that sugar is the problem, Okay, now look at this. This is from Dr. David Unwin, who I was talking about, who's a genius when it comes to diabetes. Look up all his stuff if you can. But remember, if you have diabetes, don't make any changes until you see a doctor. But if you look at these info, this is specifically for people with type 2 diabetes, but I think, in my opinion, anybody can benefit from this if you want to have essentially a low carb diet. But look at things that are like staple diets, staple stuff that we have. So if you look at the bottom right hand corner where it's quoted healthy breakfast, this was Dr. David Unwin's breakfast. Okay, average breakfast, and essentially this used to be my breakfast or Sehri, for example, right? In Ramadan, a bowl of brown flakes or cereal, milk, toast, fruit juice, 16 teaspoons of sugar in your diet, 16 teaspoons. Okay, now go to the top left-hand corner. Look at the top, rice. It's like a staple diet, right, in our culture, isn't it? 10 spoons of sugar in a moderate serving. Okay, now remember, our plates are large and we have far more than 150 grams. Okay, that's 10 teaspoons of sugar. Look at potato, 9. Okay, chips. I mean, how nice are chips? 7. Okay, spaghetti, which is white, 6. Okay, banana is fine if you don't have diabetes. If you've got diabetes, it can be problematic because it is high in sugar. Apple's okay, but then if you scroll down, look, complex carbs, green leafy vegetables, for example. Okay, or vegetables, they don't have much sugar in, as in refined sugar. Eggs, brilliant. You can have as many as you want. If you know, look at the bottom where it says cereals. Look at Cocoa Pops, cornflakes, 8.5 teaspoons of sugar. Okay, if you're wondering what glycemic index is, it's like how the higher the glycemic index, the more insulin you need to get that sugar to come down. So basically, you want to aim for 60s or less. Okay, if you look at Special K, that's not bad. Look at brown flakes. So if you can, oat porridge is fine because it's slow release carbohydrates. It's released over a decent longer period. So you acquire that energy in a slow. So that's actually fine. But the others, Special K is okay. But the others are actually really, really quick release and not good for you. Okay. But the point of these slides is that, look, unfortunately, it's in everything, and you've got to be conscious about this when you have your foods. Okay. So what I want you to do is take a look at David Unwin's work. Anybody who has diabetes, I want you to get hold of the 8-week blood sugar diet. You can reverse diabetes with this. Okay, get off medication as well potentially, but do it with your GP because you don't want to have. So you're on medication that will lower your sugar levels. If you then suddenly go on a low carb diet, your sugar's going to drop and you're going to have a hypoglycemic attack. You could collapse basically. So don't do anything without seeing your GP first. Take a look at the Payopi diet by Dr. Asim Malhotra, brilliant cardiologist from London. Take a look at it. It's basically a modified Mediterranean diet, which is if you're going to go on anything, go on this. Okay, and it's not like none of this is like short-term stuff. This is like long-term, lifelong stuff that you want to commit to, not just crash diets and then go back to square one. You want to enter this zone of being on this for long term. And specifically, South Asian Health Solution by Dr. Ronesh. Sorry, not since, should be Sina. Tell Ramadan's getting to know it, isn't it? South Asian Health Solution by Dr. Ronesh Sina. He talks about all of the stuff that we've done in a lot more detail. And if you want a bit more detail on what I'm talking about, the most recent talks were done with Cheadle Masjid, and it should be on their Facebook page in a bit more detail in terms of foods and the difference between complex carbs and simple carbohydrates and which protein-rich foods to go for, essentially. But take a look at that for more detail. But the bottom line is look, a lot of us have this problem. We're fat. Let's just have ultra adult conversations, okay? We're fat, okay? And it's sugar and high intake of carbs that's making us fat. It's not fat, it's sugar. And the fact that we don't do any physical activity. So it's really important to hammer this home. Okay, Eid's coming up, Eid's fine, right? If you have a celebration, it's fine. You should, okay, because it's celebrating. But generally, it shouldn't be like a thing. Carbohydrates shouldn't be rich in our diet, basically. But question yourself all along. How do you get to that point? You've got to question yourself. Why do you eat? No one asks themselves this question. Why do we eat? And the reason why we eat is to sustain our life. And essentially, if you want to take it to another level, the reason why we eat is to strengthen our body to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then the creation around us. And once you get that, once that penny drops, I'm telling you, all the other questions will just, be easy to answer. How much do you eat? Ask yourself this: are your portions big? And how often do you eat? How often do you choose to eat? How often do you find your hand going into that drawer just eating? And you don't even realize why you're eating. Are you eating because you're stressed? Are you eating because you're bored? Ask yourself these questions. And then what do you eat? Yeah, what? Because all the good stuff tastes nice, doesn't it? And essentially, it boils down to: does food control you, or do you control food? And Ramadan is proof that it's actually quite liberating, not having to worry about I need to eat. It's actually very, very liberating. So, do you control food, or does food control you? You've got to ask yourself these questions and then answer them, and it will help you with making healthier choices. But let me give you some quick wins, okay, to help you. Look, most people mistake thirst for hunger. You're not hungry, you're thirsty. So go for at least 1.5 to 2 liters of water a day, minimum, okay? And then eat with purpose. One of my friends, he's a mufti down in Leicester, really good friend of mine, Allah protect him. He said to me before Ramadan, he said, I don't eat because of pleasure, I eat because of need. And that's the way of our Salaf. That's the way of some of the scholars. They said, Anbiya, they eat once a day. Awliya, they eat twice a day. They eat twice a day. And I'm not going to say what they say about people who eat 3 times a day or more, but eat with purpose. And the purpose is to strengthen your body to serve Allah and serve creation around you. And if you want to make it easy for you, go for the way of the awliya, go for the way of the saints, which is just have 2 meals a day, 10 to 12 hours apart, okay? And go for protein-rich foods, okay? So in the morning, think egg omelette, okay, without bread. Okay, you can have it. I have it. I have omelette with a spoon. Okay, yeah, you can have egg with a spoon or a fork. Okay, but go for protein-rich foods or slow-release carbohydrates. So think oatmeal, porridge, for example, and 10 to 12 hours apart. Okay, and in the evening have protein-rich foods, slow-release carbs. Okay, and the healthy fats. And if you do get hungry, think: am I eating because I'm bored, stressed, or habit, or addiction, or am I thirsty? And if you're genuinely hungry, then just snack on raw veg, fruit, or nuts. Okay, especially hazelnuts, almonds, or walnuts. Okay, in nuts in small proportions. That's it. And if that's your blueprint, you'll be fine. Okay, you'll absolutely be fine. But go for, like I said, protein-rich, whole meal, slow-release carbohydrates. And when we talk about good fats, go for unsaturated fats. So think oily fish. Think cooking olive oil is prophetic. Okay, it's recommended to cooking. It's in the Shama'id. Cooking olive oil, not much else. Okay, avocado, the healthy nuts that we talked about. But go for unsaturated and limit your saturated fats very much so. Like limit them as much as possible. So think butter, cheese, fats on meat, stuff like that. Completely avoid processed foods. It's just rubbish. Regular takeaways, it shouldn't be a regular thing. Sugar pump foods, syrups. Watch the syrups. If you turn things around on the back, it might say low in carbs, low in calories. But remember, like if you look at calories, a Mars bar and a bowl of nuts are they're two completely different things. Okay, so if you look at some, say, these healthy bars, they're also pumped with syrups to make them taste nice. So just be careful with that, and avoid trans fats. Okay, just Google this. Avoid trans fats and avoid fried foods. And I get a lot of backlash when I talk about this from our communities. That how can you avoid fried foods in our culture? Just air fry them. Okay, you make it, because what happens is when you fry foods, the oil, it gets converted into a semi-solid molecule, which is just rock hard to digest. Khalas. Okay, so just air fry them, but avoid fried foods, completely. So again, culturally, quick wins for our culture. How can you have a salad without roti or naan or chapati? So what Ranesh Sina talks about is just substitute it for a green leafy vegetable. Psychologically, you're still dipping something in, or fine chop the veg. So if you have a salad with rice, fine chop the veg, and then just put it into your salad, and then have it with a spoon. And psychologically, you're having something with the salad. Try it. I've been doing this for ages now, so just try it with a salad. And just fill it with vegetables and have it with a spoon like a soup. It's still nice. And potato, like how can you have like a biryani without, or a salad without a potato? Substitute it for cauliflower. Okay, it's just as nice. Now, if you still like your potatoes, go for sweet potatoes. It's still not brilliant, but it's not as bad as the normal potatoes. But go for the sweet potatoes, and never ever ever have all three together. If you do, you need to run, okay, regularly to burn that off, okay? And then try not to have, like, really just try this. Try not to have bread, naan, roti, chapati. Okay, try not to have that more than twice a week. Try not to have rice more than twice a week. Try not to have potato more than twice a week. Have more, just avoid these things basically as much as you can. And you can still enjoy your food. Trust me, we've been doing it and it's fine. Essentially, what it boils down to is you look at, this is us on the right-hand side. Sehri, iftari, we just, apologies for my French, pig out, right? And this is us. Like we haven't got time to even breathe enough. Fajr or Tarawih. And essentially, if you want to make it easy for you, just follow the way of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in everything in life. Okay, it'll make it 10 times easy for you. Our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that to the effect that the son of Adam does not fill a vessel worse than his stomach. And if you need to, right, it's enough for the son of Adam ukulat, and in another Hazrat Rahimahullah, he narrated it, he said luqaymat, that hold just a few morsels that hold your back straight. And if you can't do that, then the famous, everybody's heard this: 1/3 for food, 1/3 for fluid, and 1/3 for air, right? And my Hazrat Rahimahullah used to say that some of the Hakims, they used to say, if you follow this, yeah, you find a lot of your illnesses disappear. And the scholars commentating on this, they used to say that like Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali in the compendium, he said that the doctors of the past used to say that this statement of the Prophet ﷺ is the essence of medicine. Essence of medicine. And when I mentioned this to my friends at work, my colleagues, some of them fell off the chair and said, if people did this, problem solved. But just that's the sort of you want to go for. Now, there's a few days left in Ramadan. Try it for Sahri and Iftar. That when I get that 1/3 food, 1/3 liquid, I'm going to stop. Okay, but take the way of prophecy and how he ate, he sat down, and the sitting down has a wisdom compared to being slumped on a table, because your GI tract, your gastrointestinal tract, the esophagus, your gullet, and the intestines, they're more in tune with itself, knowing when it's full, compared to when you slump down on a table. Sit on the floor, eat with your hands. Prophet ate with these 3 fingers. It's impossible to overeat like this. And our husband, he used to say that in amal of this, like luqaymat means 3 to 9 morsels grammatically. And Umar radiallahu anh used to only have maximum 9 morsels of food when he used to eat. And he would refuse to have sweet foods, or modern day what we call like mitai, halwa, things that are donuts, for example, that work. He wouldn't eat sweet foods until he knew that the fuqara of Medina would be eating this regularly. That's in solidarity. That's the sort of mizaj you want to go for. So moving on, because time is short. Physical activity. So look, big point. Okay, run all you want, do as much exercise as you want, but you cannot outrun a bad diet. And that's the message of Dr. Asim Malhotra in his book Powerful Diet. It's really, really profound statement. So just know that you can't do this without having a super rich diet. Okay, so because if you look at, say, just weight loss, 80% of it is diet, 20% is exercise. Okay, you won't lose much weight and have that physique that you want if you have a rubbish diet and you exercise or run like Forrest Gump. Okay, but there's tons of benefits. Okay, if you look, massive benefits of physical activity, including reduction in mortality. Okay, now if this was a pill, if exercise was a tablet and it reduced, your risk of dementia, for example, by 30%, or diabetes by 40%, or even cancer by 30%, that if you take this pill, the 40% reduction risk of having diabetes, it would prevent you from having it. That's only 1 in 2 people. Would you take it? Of course you would. Of course you would. Okay. But it doesn't need, there's no side effects really. You get used to it. Your body will get used to it. It's free. It's on your terms. It's a no-brainer. You've got to do it. There's just tons of benefit for here as well. Okay, and it improves your memory. You feel great. It improves your sleep. It's proven to repair cell damage. It improves your cognition, your concentration, your attention span. You're quicker here when you're physically active. I didn't get a chance to put this on, but take a look at Spark, the book. Just Google it. Spark. It's the benefits of exercise. It's magic. Okay. And so once you enter that zone, okay, I need to be more physically active, it's not hard to do. You've just got to do 150 minutes of moderate exercise in bouts of 10 minutes or more a week. And that defines it as 22.5 minutes of walking a day. Khalas, that's it. But when you walk with purpose, like you power walk, basically, brisk walking at a decent pace. Or you can do 75 minutes of vigorous activity across the week. Okay. And you should also do about 20-30 minutes of exercises that actually strengthen muscles. Okay, so muscle strengthening activity at least twice a week. And also what's really important is minimize the time that you spend sedentary, sat down. So just have this like mental note: every 45 minutes I'm going to walk or get up or move for 15 minutes. That's it. But if you do these key things, that's it. That's enough for you. Like, you don't have to like go for a power run every day. Okay, so things that you can do, like walking, brisk walking, jogging, swimming. Most communities have it. Most communities and councils are very supportive of Muslim culture. I'm sure there's men's only, women's only. You've got to take it up when restrictions ease. Cycling, hiking, gardening. Okay, any recreational type of sports, running, HIIT exercises, high intensity interval training. Personally, this is what I do. If you're busy, lazy, or both like me, you can do these. 15 minutes 4 times a week is enough. Okay, just Google it. But before you do any of these, check in with your doctor in case you've got any medical, especially HIIT exercise, because it's really high intense, especially if you've got heart disease or any arthritis. Check in with your GP whether it's appropriate for you to do this. If you want to think wider, okay, do it from the masjid. Many have. They've set up walking groups, cycling groups, sports initiatives, and so forth. And people are more likely to engage if they do it in groups than if they do it on their own. But the point is just do something. Like, don't do anything. Don't be a lazy bum, basically. You've got to do something. And it takes one thing to do it. Get rid of your phone. Okay, realistic, no one's going to do this, right? But we spend an enormous amount of time on our phone. It's like a working day, 6 to 8 hours a day on our phone, looking at nonsense, right? We do. Okay, just if you control yourself, don't let the phone control you. If you control yourself, you have far more hours in the day, and when you have far more hours in the day, you can get out and enjoy the world around you. Okay, our ummah is addicted to this device. So one thing you want to think about is, I need to really rein this in, because it's just eating my life up. If you think about it, Sheikh Ahmed Ali gave a really good example. He says, look, if we assume that for the first 15 years, when we get to 60, okay, if we assume that we sleep 8 hours a day, that's 20 years of our life gone by the time we hit 60. If we just assume that we work 8 hours a day, then that's another 20 years gone. Okay, so we've got 20 years left. And then first 15 years of our life was just wasting play and folly anyway, right? So we've got 5 years left. That's it. You've got 5 years to harvest for the akhirah, and that 5 years is going by another 8 hours a day on the phone. And you know what I'm talking about. We're all addicted to it. It's tragedy, isn't it? This is what has happened to us. But get rid of it. And if you can't get rid of it, control it as much as you can, and you'll find you have bags of hours in there. Do it for your children. Like, do it for your children. Like, don't let it be like an average child spends 6 hours a day on their phone, and a quarter of children say our parents are hypocritical. They just, two double standards basically. They tell us to get off the phone and they're addicted to themselves. The litmus test is this: is that if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you go for is your phone, you have an addiction. If the first thing you go for is you go for your phone instead of engaging with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have a problem. And if you want to sort this problem out, try this. Okay, I've mentioned this for over a year now. I learned this from a memory expert. If you don't touch your phone for the first hour of the day and the last hour of the day, watch your whole day improve. Here, watch it improve. You'll be far more productive. Okay, it's just, I could go on, but time is short. So that's the second thing. The third thing is mental health. Okay, and it's like, this picture says it all. COVID has just compounded the problem, hasn't it? So again, tragic statistics from a BAME point of view. 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 of men and 1 in 4 women, that's a quarter of women, suffer from a mental health problem, especially depression, anxiety, or OCD, etc. This is a tragic situation. 1 in 10, so 13% suffer from suicidal thoughts. And we ask Allah for afiyat and salamat. And the biggest problem is that there's a massive stigma in our communities where it's like you're not allowed to have emotions. And it's just, and of all communities, we should understand why. Look, when the Prophet ﷺ was going through the most difficult period of his life, so when they were exiled to the valley of Abu Talib for 3 years, eating leaves, in that period, Prophet ﷺ said, there were times where the only thing that Bilal and I would have to eat is what he used to store in his armpit. Can you imagine? Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, one of the first to a group of Muslims who became Muslim, and one of the 10 promised Jannah, he said that during that period, I was walking around in hunger, and it was pitch black, and I couldn't sleep because I was that hungry, and I stepped on something that was squidgy, and I couldn't see it because it was pitch black, and I just put it in my mouth. He said, to this day, I don't even know what it was. That's how hungry they were. So they came out, so that difficult 3 period, and then as soon as they came out, because of that 3-year period, Khadija fell really ill and she passed away. And then Abu Talib passed away soon after in that year. And that year was known, the ulama of Sirah, they call that year the Amul Huzn, the year of sadness. And what that means is that you're allowed to have emotions if things are happening to you. Our Prophet ﷺ did. I mean, we'll talk about strategies because he was never depressed, but he certainly had emotions. And when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, what did the Prophet ﷺ say to him? It's in the Quran that when they were in the cave and he was worried that they were going to get, caught. La tahsan, don't grieve. Okay, so it's okay to, but our community, we just don't allow this notion of narrative, just getting on with it. It just doesn't work, and we should stop saying it. And then what happens essentially is that it results in lack of seeking help. People just don't seek help because they feel like I'm going to be just shot down for nothing. So we need to have ultra adult conversations about this in our communities. And apologies if I offend somebody, but this is not a reflection of somebody's weak faith or iman at all. Life throws things at you. Allah is Hakim and Hakim. There's wisdoms behind it, but it's about that individual who's going through that difficult period. It's about supporting them to get them through this period, to get them to have what's called better emotional regulation. So we need to give them some space and compassion, empathy, and mahabbah, because it can affect anybody. But one of the key messages is that, look, it's not a death wish. People get better. It's not like, that's it. Depressed the rest of your life. It's not true. I have patients who are fine now, mashallah. Okay, but the point is that people do get better. We need to have these conversations in our communities. So the key is that if you are suffering from depression, anxiety, OCD, suicidal thoughts, but anything, just stress, seek help. Okay. But the first thing you need to do is acknowledge what you're feeling, that it's okay to have emotions. There's nothing wrong with it. You're a human being. You're allowed to have it. Of course you are. It's the way you've been made by Allah. Don't fight it. You can acknowledge what you're feeling. When you fight a feeling, it makes it 10 times worse because it's a constant fight. So it takes being gentle with yourself by saying it's okay. I'm allowed to have these, have compassion with yourself. And in fact, to seek help, you actually don't need a GP referral. I mean, if you want to seek help from a GP, of course you can, but you actually technically don't need it. So because this is in Preston, I looked into this. So internationally, there's this thing called IAPT, Improving Access to Psychological Therapies, because the easier the access is, the easier the people seek help. Just Google that if you're in Preston. You can self-refer. There's a referral form online, and you can access therapy. So just go for it if you're struggling. No one needs to know. Okay, and what they essentially go for is something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognition is why we think in this, and the reason why we think in a certain way is because of life experiences, especially childhood. Childhood molds your thinking. Behavior is how we behave depending on how we think, and the therapy is there to reset it into a healthy medium. So they're all interlinked. They're all interlinked. Like, I'll give you an example. Like if somebody just, witness somebody, breaking into a car, for example, smashing a window, your thoughts are going to start to kick in, aren't they? And then emotions will kick in, and then equally it'll impact your thought process at the same time. And then you will choose to behave in a certain way and how to respond to that person who just broke into somebody's car. Okay, but it depends on your thoughts and emotions, and that triggers your behavior. Now that can be reset through having therapy. So that's in a nutshell, what you go for. And it can be reset. It's all about what we call changing perceptions, how you view things, which is essentially what our ulama talk about when it talks about understanding Allah's hikmah behind everything. But that's the sort of thing you want to go for. But remember, when it comes to mental health, really, it has to come from within. So what I say to my patients is that, look, I can help you from my side. Like if you need medication, of course I'll give it you. But when it comes to the other stuff, it has to come from you. No one can change. You have no control over the world around you or anybody around you. The only thing you have control of is yourself. That's what Allah's given you control over. So you can make your own choices. You have to have a super rich diet. Look at the SMILE study that we talked about earlier. You have to have a good exercise regime. I have a patient who was suicidal and he did not want to go into medication, but he had to because he was suicidal. He wasn't keen at all. And we had this conversation about exercise. And he went from 0 to running 12K 3 times a week. And whenever he sees me, he says to me, he says, Dr. Goga, he says, if you didn't convince me to run, I'd be dead. It really holds him together. So you have to have a super rich diet. You have to have a really good exercise regime. You have to, alongside some, seeking therapy, medication if you need it, so checking with your doctor. especially if you're on the severe spectrum. But remember, even if you're on the severe spectrum, remember medication is part of the solution. Okay, about 20-30% of the solution. The rest is what we're talking about. Okay, so you have to understand that it comes from within. Don't expect anything or anybody to change and then you be happy. Life doesn't work like that. You have to figure out how to manage this better in you, within you. And so a couple of key things, like there's things that are toxic in your life that you need to eliminate. Eliminate toxic foods. We've talked about this. Eliminate toxic lifestyles, being glued to screens, basically, or phones or social media. Eliminate it. And I hate saying this, but it has to be said because we have to have ultra adult conversations. There are people in your life who you know are toxic for you. And you have to think about not eliminating them, because our deen, our sharia is very balanced. You have to draw healthy boundaries, because there's Allah's given us a framework that you can't cut people off, but how you can have healthy boundaries. And speak to ulama if you're struggling with somebody who's really difficult, really toxic, especially if it's family. Speak to ulama of how to deal with this with hikmah and with healthy boundaries. Okay, take guidance from those that know. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. But think about that, okay? And also social media, it's a silent killer. I mean, the studies have been done, they've proved it, that it's really detrimental to mental health. Depression, anxiety rates are high in those who are glued to these things than those who are not. Last year, there was a study done of a group of young people. For a month, they came off Facebook. That's it, they just came off Facebook. They were happier, less depressed, less anxious, slept better, and also had what they call more meaningful lives. Like, following these things, what happens is you end up living up to other people's expectations, or you end up living a life that's imitating somebody else, or you're following somebody and you're not living your own life. You don't have a very meaningful or fulfilling life, really. So get off these things completely. I mean, of course, if it's dini, it's beneficial, but most other things, I'm not saying there's no benefit. What I'm saying is that most things, it's not beneficial. But if you can control it, that's the key. If you can control it, that's better for you. But if you find that you're addicted and glued to these things, and the litmus test is you're going it for no reason, just think about it, especially if you suffer from any mental health issues. I mean, it's tragic, isn't it? Like you've got a family where you're having a meal, or you can walk into a room in the evening and everybody's on their phone, or someone's on their laptop, or someone's on the TV, and no one's talking. Now, it's just like you look at. It's heartbreaking. Like when I drop my kids off to school, and you're looking at kids waiting at a bus stop. There's a group of friends, and they're all on the phone. They're not talking to each other. It's tragedy. So that's one aspect, and then the next aspect is, look, it's all about focus. So if you want to reach optimum emotional regulation, okay, just ask yourself, what am I focusing on? And in life, if you just look at these things, there's only a few things that are important in life, and this is it. And if you look at these things, if you focus on these things and choose to focus on this and nothing else, you'll find that you'll probably have a lot more emotional well-being. And in no particular order, look, health is really important. It's one of the most important things it's the most important thing in your life. So, when lockdown first happened, they surveyed people when they were in lockdown last year. They said, what are the most important things in your life? Top, health. 2, family. These, they weren't bothered about anything else. People weren't bothered about it. So don't, fall for this, current narrative that's going on about, what Jamie Oliver calls selfish capitalism, just getting rich quick and, I'm going to be happy after that. In terms of wealth, have enough and give excess. That's the way of our salaf. Have enough, okay, and you know what enough is, okay. As Rahimullah used to say that, one of the biggest bimaris of people who have wealth in our zamana, they're never content with that car, with that house, with the size of their house, with their clothes, with their phone, with their food, etc. They're never content. It's a massive spiritual illness. So go for enough, and then excess give. Growth in terms of your career, in terms of yourself, in terms of your own self-development. Think about that. Some people are in dead-end jobs and they're not making any. They don't have a meaningful job, making no meaningful changes for anybody, for themselves, or for around them. You can change at any point. Think about it. What about your community? Are you connecting to your community and contributing and making a difference to somebody's life? You know where they all are. You know where all the homeless people are, but we just choose to ignore them. We know exactly who on our street are old and on their own, but we just ignore them. Think about it. If that when people who give to others, honestly, they feel really great up here. It's a gift that Allah gives you. Spirit, the most important thing, your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's ridiculously important. Ramadan is proof of it, how important it is to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you'll understand that the biggest joy in life is intimacy with Allah. And ask those who have had it. Like they would not trade it for anything. Okay, so think about how much time you spend on that and focus on that. What about relationships with yourself? You need to have a level of self-respect and self-love and compassion with yourself and looking after yourself, which is linked with health. What about relationships with your life partner, your husband, your wife? What about that? I mean, most juice in life comes from relationships with intimate relationships. You have to make it work. You have to figure out if it's not working, figure out a way of making it work. Seek help. What about core family, okay, and core friends? And I'm not talking about the 1,000 or 10,000 followers you've got. I'm talking about people who are going to be there for you when you need you. So, now, if you focus on these things, it's called the wheel of life. If you focus on these things and nothing else, you'll be far better up here. Try it. And then we talked about the fourth thing, which is spiritual growth, which is about strengthening your faith. Now, Dr. Riaz has already done these, so take a look at his seminar because it's far more detailed and far better adept at speaking about these things than myself. I'm just a regular dude, but this is something that you really need to think about strengthening your faith to improve your well-being. And the biggest struggle that people have is when is understanding life, and why things happen. Okay, and it's just about flipping it. Look, life happens for us. It doesn't happen to us. And that's where Allah's Hakim. He decides what happens. He's Hakim. He has a lot of wisdom behind it, to such a degree that Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he mentions in his 40 principles of religion, Arba'in fi Usul ad-Din, he mentions that if a human being was given insight into good, evil, benefits, harm, if the veil was lifted from man, and then he could see, say, into the future, for example, he could see how the reality of everything, and then man chose to dictate where and how his life goes. He says it would still be incomplete compared to how Allah has done it for us. In other words, just leave it with Allah, because if you were to rewrite your life, you wouldn't rewrite it any other way, because there's a deep wisdom in everything that happens for us, not to us. Okay, and I have friends, right? They've been through the mill. They've been through some of the most difficult periods of that, and they've said openly that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I found Allah. And if through that you find Allah, alhamdulillah. Do you understand? But it's about understanding that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you. And if you're struggling, take this is a really interesting, famous a dua of the Prophet ﷺ. There's a story behind this, that Abu Umama was sat in the masjid and he was really sad. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, why are you? So you go back to our conversation, the Sahaba had emotions, it's okay. So the Prophet ﷺ said, why are you sat? He was sat in the masjid and it wasn't time for Salah. And he said, why are you sat in the masjid and it's not time for Salah? And Abu Umama said that, I'm just I'm overwhelmed with grief, worry, and debt. So the Prophet ﷺ said, why don't I teach you some words? If you were to say this, Allah will remove your sadness and see to your debts. He said, tell me. And the Prophet ﷺ, you can read it for yourself, told him this. And Abu Umama radiallahu anhu said that I read this, for a few days and solved. In other words, your thiqah, your faith, you should be resolute, not in anything, not yourself, not people around you, not the world around you, nothing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason, one of the wisdoms why we're squeezed by Allah, is so the juice comes out. Our ulama, they say that when you squeeze an orange, for example, the best juice, okay, the finest juice is when it's squeezed to its tightest, when you really squeeze it out. Okay, and so what happens is during these moments, potentially the best can come out of you, for what Allah wants from you, the best can come out of you. And our ulama, they also say that the other wisdom, one of the biggest wisdoms of why we have trials and tests in our life, is so that you detach yourself from this world and you attach yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it's very easy to get attached to this world and forget about our ultimate destination, which is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you do realize that the shortest period of our soul's journey is here. So God, Allah knows how long we were in the realm of the souls, and then our soul was infused into the womb. And then our time on this earth, so that 9 months in the womb, and then however many years Allah's given you life on this earth, is the shortest period of your journey. Because then after that is barzakh, which is, I mean, look at the Prophet has been, it's been in the realm of the barzakh for 1400 years. He was 63 years when he passed away. How long is that? And then eternity, your soul will be in paradise, inshallah. So if you look back, so the point is that exhausting all your energy for here, short-sighted. It's short-sighted for a mu'min. And so one of the biggest wisdoms of when why we have trilogy is that we detach from this world, recognizing that it's just nothing. It's nothing. And so accustom yourself to this gift that the Prophet ﷺ, with yaqeen, with certainty, that it's Allah will sort this out for me. And essentially we talked about in the wheel of life and focus again. If you had 1 week to live, what would you, if you knew you had 1 week to live, what would you focus on? How would you spend your time? What would you choose to ignore? And again, Ramadan is proof of this, because how much do we let go of just nonsense, and then how much do we focus on capitalizing in the akhirah in Ramadan? It's like a switch, isn't it? It's amazing that just the moment you hear that Ramadan has come in, your whole being, your whole mind, body, soul recognizes what's beneficial and what is not beneficial, what's good use of time, what's not a good use of time for dunya and for akhirah, because you enter that zone. Now, what about, and we all say, I wish Ramadan could be every day. And that's like a believer's tamanna, because it's such a beautiful month, like the best comes out of you in all of its sense, okay? Now, potentially one way of having that, like every day can be Ramadan, is recognizing that when you wake up, the way of the process, and when you wake up, don't wait for the evening, you might not make it. And when you sleep, don't wait for the morning, you might not make it. And so what you do, if you enter that zone, you recognize that every single breath that you take is priceless. And it's either going to be for me or against me. And so I'm going to max out in this moment right now. That it's going to be this moment right now that I'm in is going to be the best. And then if you enter that zone, each moment you have is going to be better than the last, better than the last, better than the last. And you are cashing in with you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you will have, is the thing, is that what we talked about, that joy, that internal joy. Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah, he used to say to the Ahl dunya, the abna dunya, the people who are engrossed in materialism, he used to say to them, you think that's joy? Come to a dars, come to a class, and when the penny drops in a ruling or a mas'ala or a statement of deen, when the penny drops and you have realization, he goes, compare that mazhar to your mazhar and you'll understand. But that's the point, isn't it? That when it comes, this joy of the soul that it gains when it has intimacy and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is infinitely greater than anything that's on this planet. But it takes a mindset to get to that stage. And Ramadan's ultimate lesson, and we're nearly finished now, Ramadan's ultimate lesson is the fallacy of materialism. I mean, the generosity of the believers come out in Ramadan. You can see it. The other day, one of the brothers, he's raising money for a hospital in Yemen, and in no time, he's nearly hit £25,000. And this brother, I didn't know him. Just, randomly you get messages coming across. But mashallah, internally, you look at what's going on in the world and you think, gosh, how can I live like this when my fellow human beings, and those people who know me will understand why I'm saying this, but those who are connected to our Hazrat Rahimullah, this was his message. Like if anybody remembers this, it was 2014 Ittikaf, and he mentioned something beautiful, and it had a really big impact on me. Massive impact on me. He said, when his brother passed away, he said this in 2014, it's been a few years, I think, since his brother passed away. And he said, Sheikh Abdul Rahim Rahimullah, and he said, his son, he said, even, a few years have passed by, but it's as if his dad's just passed away yesterday, his grief. And, he's still highly emotional, doesn't eat properly, doesn't, how you'd expect someone to be when they're grieving. And then Hazrat Rahimullah said that, look, this is how someone behaves when they're grieving. Like they don't have this thing of when am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? They don't have this. The timetable goes out the window. They have no concern for material things. And then he said, and this is something to listen to. And then he said, to the effect, if I remember correctly, that we know what's happening in the world, but we're living as if we have no rishtidar, no connection to anybody else on the planet, what they're going through. And that's something to think about. And look what's happening in India. One of my wife's friends, she's a doctor as well. She does an enormous amount of relief work, and essentially, to understand what Hazrat's trying to say, listen to what she's saying. She said that she does so much. She I think currently right now she's in Lebanon, a Syrian refugee camp. She said, look, when you see what people are going through, like yesterday, if you read the news, there was a Somali brother in a camp in Greece who was found dead. They don't know how long he was dead for, and rats were nibbling away at him. Right now, she said, when you see things like this, when you go to refugee camps and see what they're going through, thinking about my next car, or thinking about having that dream home, or thinking about my next holiday, or going out to eat, or what I'm going to, that's not even a question anymore. And this was the message of Hazrat, that subdue everything that you can, your homes, your furniture, your dress, your food, your car, your business, etc. Just subdue it and just think about people who aren't fortunate and learn to give. Okay, and that's Ramadan's lesson. What's really interesting about my friend who's doing this relief work, she said, in fact, one of my other friends who just came back from the refugee camp in Lebanon, he said, these people are happy. You understand? Like, so we, I'm reading a book right now called Radical Simplicity. I forget who the author is. He says himself, why is it that, and he's from America, he says, why is it that I can earn $30,000-$40,000 a year and be miserable, but somebody in Kerala in India can live off $500 a year and be happy as Larry? And this is Ramadan's lesson, that that having less, having more, that doesn't necessarily makes your life a bit easier, but it doesn't necessarily make you happy or fulfilled. And that's Ramadan's lesson. The fallacy of materialism is what Jamie Oliver calls selfish capitalism. If you get a chance to read his book Affluenza, you'll understand Zuhud. If from what he's trying to say about this narrative that's just out there in the world to get rich quick and live rich lives and forget about everybody and everything else. But the key is, and my husband used to say this a lot, often used to say this, that look, if you can understand this, you'll be fine. And this is Ramadan's message, isn't it? That the intelligent one is the one who suppresses his nafs, the ramblings of the nafs that I want, and works for the akhirah, what comes after death. While ajiz, the weak one, and in another wording is actually ahmaq, the stupid one, okay, the foolish one, who when atba'a nafsahu hawaha, who just allows his caprice just a free reign and just does whatever they want, وَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ, and then have hopes in Allah. It just doesn't work, does it? So look, the definition of intelligence is the prophetic. Our definitions come from Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no one and nothing else. Okay, this is the definition of intelligence. Someone who does work for the next life. And the beauty of our religion is you can make this world a harvest for the next world. And so even your dunyawi actions you can potentially earn an immense reward and make it for the akhirah at the same time. But that takes company with shuyukh and ulama and learning your deen seriously to understand these steps. So final thoughts, if you want to summarize everything, take the way of prophecy, take the way of the Prophet ﷺ. How did he eat? What did he choose to eat as well? One of the shuyukh, this was before Ramadan, from Syria, we were listening into prophetic medicine, and he said that if you don't feel healthy when you eat, there's a few reasons why. He said it's probably because you're not eating halal. Firstly, you have to eat halal. Okay, you just don't feel good spiritually if you don't. Secondly, he said you're probably not eating the prophetic foods. And if you are eating halal and you're eating, so the prophetic foods are what's called wholesome. Halal and tayyiba, food isn't just supposed to be halal, it's supposed to be tayyib, wholesome. So if you are eating halal and tayyib, so permitted foods and wholesome, and still not finding benefit in terms of your health is not good and your spirit, your soul isn't good linked with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're not taking away your prophecy, it's probably because you're not eating how the Prophet ate. And the Prophet, physically, and he was, look, if you look at the Shama'il, his chest and his stomach was flat. Like, he didn't have a belly. Like, to do that, you have to be fit and healthy. Anybody rode a horse who's listening, it's hard work. And he, up to his 60s, he was riding a horse. The story of Rugana, the strongest man, okay, and he floored him 3 times. So the Prophet ﷺ was, and he was strong, mashallah, fit individual. Okay, emotional regulation. Yes, of course he grieved, Amun Huzn, but he was the happiest man on the planet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he was content, because he had, the greatest, that anyone, Allah's given anybody tawfiq in terms of iman and thiqa and yaqeen. The greatest is the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why he was the most content individual on the planet, and never lost hope, didn't fall into, depression because of his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most perfect, akmal insan, being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah created. And then that ultimately links on to the fourth thing, which is your link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these 4 things are elements to reach healthier well-being, inshallah. I hope this will be beneficial. I prefer not to take any questions, if that's okay with MASJID-E-SALIHEEN. I don't know if there are any, but inshallah we'll stop there. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.